Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where today, for the first two stories, we're dealing with some serious blasts from the past. Like, wow, you're still making these movies, Hollywood? And Hollywood is like, yes, we are. And the first is from Disney. And so we're all like, well, Disney seems to be able to do no wrong, so go ahead. But they have fumbled a little bit with some of their live-action fairy tales, particularly the ones that are a bit too feminist. I'm talking about Alice in Wonderland. The first one did very well, but then the second absolutely tanked. And the first was the very first live-action fairy tale, and it was a surprise feminist movie. I liked it, but I remember a lot of people complaining about it at the time. And of course, that audience totally vanished by the time the second film came around. Also very late in the game, incidentally. And Maleficent, of course, was also extremely feminists, right? To the point where they were like, the prince is useless. And everyone, that was kind of like the beginning of this current trend. But it was one of the less, let's say, one of the ones with the least amount of finesse, right? But the movie made a lot of money, and Angelina Jolie was quite impressive in the role. I think probably one of her trademark roles of her career, along with, let's say, Lara Croft, right? And I think Angelina Jolie's like a character in and of herself, right? But so she's going to return, and then the big headline, and the reason this is in the news, is that Ed Skrein will be playing the villain. And one has to wonder if perhaps he'll be playing Brad Pitt, the movie's version of Brad Pitt. I joke, but you're going to see as we work our way through this story that maybe he is kind of. But anyway, the reason I bring up Brad Pitt is that I think that Angelina Jolie might have done even more harm than she realizes. And she realizes she's done some harm, but I think even more so to her own image when she tried to really bring Brad Pitt down during their recent divorce and accused him of abusing their children and trying to not give him any custody. And you might recall that at the Golden Globes this year, everyone gave him a standing ovation because they all feel so bad for poor Brad Pitt. Just to give you some context, Brad Pitt has been kind of like a pawn in this tabloid game of Angelina Jolie. All he's really wanted is a family. He didn't go about it a very good way, but the problem was that he was married to Jennifer Aniston. It was a real Hollywood wedding. They had the same, I believe, publicist or agent, or I think it was agent, Brad Gray, who started Plan B with both of them, actually, which became Brad Pitt's company once he and Jennifer Aniston got divorced. But Brad Pitt really wanted to have a family, and Jennifer Aniston said, not now. And so that's how Angelina Jolie was able to get him. She was like, I've already started one with Maddox. And Maddox is the one who apparently he had the altercation with on the plane because Maddox, really has no connection to Brad Pitt and was really on Angelina Jolie's side. And it was a difficult, complex situation. So that's what happened. And so I think that to try and take Brad Pitt's family away from him is really a low blow, like really hitting below the belt. And I think that she's gone too far. And then, of course, there were some really, it seemed, culturally insensitive stories about her latest film. I believe it was in an interview in one of those flash, nice magazines like Vanity Fair or something, which also didn't make her look good either. So let's see if her reputation is intact enough to be in another Maleficent movie. She might, it might have gone too far, a little Jennifer Lawrence-like, and I think she's struggling as well because of things that she says in the press. It's a double-edged sword to use the press to your advantage. Sometimes people like Jennifer Lawrence and Angelina Jolie only have careers because of the magazine covers they sell and the clicks they're able to get, because that holds them up when their box office isn't doing so well. But sometimes you can go too far and define yourself too much as an actual person that people can no longer see you as a character. And also they dislike you so much as a regular person, as your own person, they can't forget about that when they're watching you on screen. So it's a real problem. But so hopefully this won't bring down poor Ed Skrein, who's become something of a professional villain a la Ben Mendelsohn. You might recall he started out on Game of Thrones, right, as Khaleesi's lover, right? Poor Sir Friendzone. But he had to be recast, that role had to be recast because he left the series, he left Game of Thrones to be the new transporter, taking over that franchise for Jason Statham. Didn't work out for him. He was pretty good in the role, but he got a lot of attention in Deadpool as the villain there. Hollywood, if Hollywood doesn't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So he did as well as a villain in Deadpool, so now that's all that Hollywood sees him as. He's a villain in the upcoming Alita Battle Angel, which I'm very excited about. And now, of course, Maleficent 2. Now, he also got a lot of headlines recently. He helped his image by rejecting the role, as I'm sure you recall, we talked about it a lot, of Major Ben Damio in the upcoming Hellboy movie when he learned that it was a role that had originally been Asian in the comics. And that role eventually went to Daniel Day Kim, who, interestingly enough, enough, had just recently left Hawaii Five-0 because of the pay disparity between him and I believe it's like Grace Park. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but his co-star, the two Asian leads on the show, weren't getting paid as much as the Caucasian leads. So they left, and Daniel Dae Kim landed on his feet. His co-star, not so much. But, it's when you take a stand for something, sometimes it's tough. You can't stay standing. But I'm glad that at least one of them has done well, and that was really a stand-up thing for Ed Skrein to do. Now this Maleficent 2 also has a director. It's going to be one of the Pirates 5 directors, Joaquin Roning, and it's interesting to see another directing duo break up, just like the directing duo on the first John Wick. They went their separate ways. Chad Stahelski has stayed with that franchise, I think, beautifully. He's become quite an artist, but it's hard to have any problems with David Leitch's career trajectory, going from John Wick, the first one, to Atomic Blonde, to now Deadpool 2, and just signing on for that Fast and Furious. Speaking of Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson spinoff. That's amazing. They're both doing very well. But I have to tell you, as much as I liked Kon-Tiki, I felt a little betrayed because I really vouched for this directing duo for Pirates 5, and I thought they didn't really do anything with the material. Darn it! All right, so then Elle Fanning also is returning as Sleeping Beauty, and Linda Woolverton, who scripted the first animated Beauty and the Beast and the first Maleficent, the live-action one, is also returning, and I would advise her in particular to tone down that feminism. For instance, Brenton Thwaites played the prince, right? The fake-out, right? Love's True Kiss. Oh, it's not the prince! This came out right around the same time as Frozen, so it was like, Disney was really doubling down on, sister loving sister and mother loving daughter is the best thing you can have. But anyway, Brenton Thwaites doesn't seem to be returning, right? Not listed here. He's busy with the Titans show, although his schedule could soon clear up if it continues on the path that it seems to be going down. But maybe he grows up to be Ed Skrein, right? And he's the new prince, and then he's the villain because he's just horrible, right? Like Sleeping Beauty's husband turns out to be a real mess, and it's just a bunch of marriage problems, right? I don't know. We'll see how this shakes out. But I feel it's just too damn late. All right, so I'm curious if you think it's too late for Maleficent 2, how you think that whole dramatic mess on and off camera sounds, and then also how you feel about How to Train Your Dragon. Can this franchise return? Because it's gonna. Now, the last How to Train Your Dragon came out in 2014, and now How to Train Your Dragon 3 is coming out as they promised. Well, they kept delaying it, but now, 2019, it's going to happen, and DreamWorks Animation just announced the title, The Hidden World, which has a real Fallen Kingdom vibe to it, in my opinion. But again, it just seems really late. That's 5 years, right? Well, it will still be the phenomenon it once was. How to Train Your Dragon, just so you know, for those of you who don't recall, when it was in its heyday, it was really a hot ticket. Like it did particularly well. Like my coverage of it, did very well. It was like Frozen level phenomenon in terms of audience interest. I'm curious to see if Frozen will still have the same level of interest down the line. It's waned since the movie came out. It does not get quite the attention. The headlines don't get the attention they once did. So I'm curious to see if if Maleficent, How to Train Your Dragon 3, and Frozen 2, if there's still interest in these properties. I mean, Hollywood's bringing back Jurassic Worlds, the Jurassic Park franchise, Star Wars. So nostalgia does work, but I think maybe you need a little bit more room, to really make, this just seems like, we don't care anymore, instead of like, remember back in the day. I think maybe that's the magic ingredient. Also, How to Train Your Dragon 2 was notable for doing a time jump for its characters, aging them up like Legend of Korra did, which I think is very savvy, to age up your characters with your audience group. So in the first How to Train Your Dragon, it was tweens. Then it became full-fledged teens for the sequel, and I hope they're full, grown-up adults, established adults for How to Train Your Dragon 3. That might warrant a return if they did that, to see where these characters ended up. So I'm curious also on that property. Then for the third story of the day, Disney's really reaching on this one. I have mixed feelings about this. So yesterday, Ava DuVernay was excited to share the news that her pal and fellow director, Victoria Mahoney, will be the second unit director on Star Wars Episode 9. And some of you, took Ava DuVernay at her word and were like, oh, this is a big deal. And it's kind of a big deal. I think it's a big deal for what it could potentially lead to than for what it actually is right now. So second unit director, not a big job. Second unit directors rarely level up to director. What a second unit director does, and that's evidenced by the fact that you don't know who any second unit directors are, right? I mean, we know directors who used to be writers, we know directors who used to be actors, directors who used to be production designers, cinematographers, etc., etc. But it's very rare to see a director who used to be a second unit director. What this person does is they're in charge of the crew that goes and gets all the shots that the director doesn't feel that he or she needs to be there for. So that just gives you some idea of the shots they're in charge of. We're talking pickups for action sequences, right? Like, quick cutaways from the storyboarding, explosions, stuff like that. Although, for obviously the really big explosions, the director would want to be there. Also establishing shots of a scene, etc., etc. So I think that Disney, usually you would never announce that this person, who the second unit director on a movie was. But Disney, so eager to get someone who isn't a white male behind the camera in particularly their Star Wars division, I guess, is happy to promote this. And for Ava, and also, again, I have a little bit of a problem with Ava DuVernay muscling in on stuff that she's not involved with, right? I mean, it's like, come on, are you now a part of the DCEU with New Gods? I mean, you're on, she probably feels she's on a bigger team and that's promoting black talent in Hollywood, and I think that's great. But, she tried to be a part of Black Panther and feel like she had some creative ownership in that thing. Then, so I didn't appreciate that. And I don't like her being like, oh, Victoria Mahoney is an extension of me. It's like, no, Victoria Mahoney is awesome. Victoria Mahoney should have tweeted it out, or J.J. Abrams should have done it. Or even Kathleen Kennedy saying, I'm so happy to have, to welcome this, diversity of talent behind the camera in the Star Wars universe. So, yeah, but none of them did. So that's the other thing. That's why I feel mixed about this. DuVernay did do it, and I think that maybe she and Mahoney, by getting enough attention, could maybe turn this into something, whereas normally it wouldn't be. That's a very important skill in life, being able to take something, no matter how small it is, and have it lead to something else. Stay alive, keep moving forward, no matter how small the progress might be. That's, again, a very good skill. And Mahoney comes from largely a TV background as a director, so who knows? Maybe for that Star Wars streaming show that Disney's working on, that Jon Favreau signed on to, it's going to need directors, so maybe she could jump to that. So, I'm curious, does it make a difference to you that I was going to say Ava DuVernay. Victoria Mahoney is the second unit director on Star Wars Episode 9. Do you feel this constitutes progress? And what do you think of Ava DuVernay mixing in like that? All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Hail Mary. Great name. So Hail Mary says, Grace, I'm one of those groups that doesn't go to the cinema. I love movies, but I just don't like the cinema experience. I watch 6 to 7 movies a week, but in the last 5 years, I've been to the cinema maybe 3 times. Mary, I'm curious, could you write down below what those 3 times were? I'm very, very interested. At least the ones that you remember. So Mary continues saying, I'm curious, and this could be a viewer question. It is, how much Hollywood actually cares about those individuals like me? I appreciate the box office numbers are the important ones, but wouldn't overall reach in secondary and home markets be considered equally important? I would imagine a film company would make more through all the combined secondary sales, be that licensing for hotels or Netflix DVD sales. Keep up the awesome stuff, Grace. Thank you, Mary. Great question. And I can understand feeling, oh, hey, well, if I don't contribute to the box office, maybe Hollywood doesn't value me. That is not true. Hollywood values you the most of all. Now, it's not so much secondary sales, they're not going to make as much as a blockbuster would at the box office because those numbers are huge. Maybe eventually, decades later it would, but still the biggest numbers for the huge movies come in the theater. But for smaller films, yes, the ancillary market can dwarf what was actually taken in from the theater. But you're very important because it's just like for a long time DVD sales and VHS sales propped up the industry. Hollywood needs a huge cash flow, and it doesn't come from the box office. That's the engine. But the real cargo, let's say, is this cash flow later on down the line. And after losing VHS and then DVD sales, Hollywood now feels that streaming is that cash revenue. And that's where you come in, Mary. So that's very important. So first off, Hollywood does care about they care about you, Mary, and trying to make sure that they are one of the 3 times you go to the movies, right? They're like, Mary only goes once in a blue moon. What are we going to do to convince her that this should be one of those times? And then all the headlines that they want to get from strong box office, that's for your benefit, Mary. They want to make sure that when the movie does become available on streaming, that you watch it. Maybe you even purchase it on iTunes digitally, or you buy a physical copy for those of you who still do that. That's who that box office headline, in addition to getting people to see the movie while it's in theaters, but that's also who Hollywood is making an effort to appeal to. So don't worry, you're very valuable. And as you see a push even more aggressively into the streaming area with Disney setting up their own service, etc., know that again is all for viewers like yourself, Mary. So you are very valued by Hollywood. All right, so I'd be curious to know everyone else's movie-going habits down below. Your thoughts on today's 3 stories. Also, again, your thoughts on Mary's viewer question. Anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and of course, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.